in terms of in the bedroom, are narcissistics a certain way in the bedroom?
Sex is a funny thing with them because it can actually be a very complicated, fraught space in a relationship. Narcissistic people really do use sex as a place of control, of domination, of shaming. Like, it's not the healthiest space, but narcissistic people can also be very attractive sexual partners and very skilled sexual partners because they want validation and admiration. They want to be told, you gave me the best orgasm ever, or you're the best lover. So they will often, because narcissistic people are successful for a reason. It's often because they're quite obsessive in their focus to get something right, including sex. And people with narcissistic personalities have been found to be more what we call reward sensitive. They are sort of our dopamine group. They love stuff that's high reward and quick reward. So gambling and alcohol and drugs and sensation seeking, any shopping, pornography, exactly. Yeah. Anything that's that quick hit. And so sex is going to be no different. That's going to be one more thing where you do it and it feels good. So sex and narcissism, they like sex, right? The challenge is narcissistic people are very, very limited in their capacity for intimacy. So some of the things we know is that sex addiction, define it as you wish, is correlated with narcissism. Not all people with sex addiction are narcissistic, but a decent chunk are. And in fact, many narcissistic people will sort of commandeer sex addiction as the explanation for why they're chronically cheating on a spouse or chronically watching pornography, but it's actually they don't meet the criteria. It feels more acceptable than I'm really selfish and I don't care if I'm hurting your feelings kind of thing. There can be a lot of shaming around sexuality when it comes to narcissistic folks. So narcissistic people like to hold the stopwatch for the relationship. They control the timers. And so they want things to move at a pace that works for them. So when you first meet a narcissistic person and you say, hey, I'd love things to slow down, sex is a great example of that, where a person might say like, well, I don't know that I'm ready to go sort of into this like this, right? And then the kind of pushback you might see is that the narcissistic person is like, oh, I guess you really don't want a relationship, or, I guess, what are you, a prude? Like, are you frigid? They'll use words like that, which shame the other person, gaslight the other person who's not those things at all, but they just want to be sure and they want to feel emotionally safe. And people will sort of feel they feel compelled. That they'll say, I like enough things about this person. The sex thing got weird, but maybe I am a prude, so I'm going to go ahead and have sex with them. And then it wouldn't be unusual 9 months, a year into a relationship where the narcissistic person might actually shame the person. Well, you gave that up quickly. You give it up quickly for everyone else. So then they'll twist and weaponize that. They will often try to coerce or manipulate or encourage. I'm using a range of words. Coerce obviously is extreme. Encourage or manipulate or pull a partner into sexual behaviors they may not be fully comfortable with, then shame them for it later. So it can really make it this very, very confused place. And narcissistic people may withhold sex as a way of punishing a partner. A person may feel like sex is a place of connection. So the narcissistic person, that's how they'll sort of exert their power, by not showing up that way. And the sex might be performative and it might be theatrical, but it often doesn't feel connected. It can often feel sort of like the sort of the oxytocin part of the sex tends to be missing, right? The cuddling and the holding and all of that. Like that almost is sort of like, you can imagine that sort of film trope where the person sort of staring at the ceiling and counting down, like, how long do we have to do this for? So that's sort of a narcissistic kind of a sort of, please don't make me do this real genuine intimacy part. I was really good with the other part of it. And so it's not the healthiest space, but because they care so much about sex, many people will say, I felt not only trauma bonded to this narcissistic person, meaning like I felt like I couldn't get out of it and I kept justifying it. The sex muddies the waters, because some people will say the sex was the hard part to leave, because it actually was, it felt good. They really were so devoted to my climax, my orgasm, that people thought they'd sort of lucked into something and they don't want to leave it. And so it can confuse the relationship even more.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. In terms of What if that other partner who's like not the narcissist wants to pleasure themselves or use sex toys or watch pornography? I imagine that the narcissist feels threatened by that. Is that typical?
I think that if another partner was trying, if a partner came into a narcissist's life and actually was suggesting more novelty, might even be the one who was saying, let's go, let's do more interesting things. My bet would be that the narcissistic person would try to shame that behavior, because that's such a powerful tool of manipulation. I think it would also shame the narcissistic person who may come to the realization that their sexual repertoire isn't maybe as robust as this new partner they're with. And so that sense of look, I'm supposed to be all that. I'm a interesting, compelling, whatever the heck I am. That somebody else is coming in like this might also make them feel inadequate, sexually inadequate as a partner. And so that's going to be met with anger. Anytime the narcissistic person feels shame, they tend to react with anger.
So if they felt, for example, like this person's always getting off with their sex toys so easily, they might even feel threatened by that.
Oh, absolutely. Because why are you doing that? Am I not good enough for you? And what the narcissistic person will often do is, especially if the other person, in this case, the sex toy person in the relationship, actually likes the relationship well enough, they haven't fully dug down into the layers of the narcissism, but like it's a fine enough relationship, or you've invested a lot of time in the relationship, or kids, or all the other things that create the glue of a relationship, that when that narcissistic person might feel sort of competitive with your sex toy, as it were, and the person with the sex toy might be insistent and say, this is part of my sexual health. Like, I enjoy this. This is not instead of, this is an addition to, like, it's just me enjoying my body. The narcissistic person may very well threaten abandonment. Like, oh, I guess I'm not good enough. Or I guess I'm not enough. You know what? You're kind of a freak, and they'll sort of shame it, like one might shame a kink or something like that. So they'll shame them. You're weird. You're freaky. And you know what? This isn't for me. Now that person with the sex toy, that's not what the outcome they wanted. They wanted their partner to perhaps join in this and embrace this part of this person's sexuality. So now that person, the other person, the sex toy using person, is feeling like, maybe I need to stop this, or is it worth blowing up this relationship over? And so that can create a lot of confusion. You'd have to be a very, not only sex positive person, but a self-assured person to say, okay, then I'm picking my vibrator over you. Bye. Most people don't do that. And people who do that, they've got this thing figured out like nobody else. And that's not most people. Because like I said, the narcissism up, down, side, the way it's good, it's bad. There are things about these folks who are attractive. When we love someone, we love someone. I mean, that's a whole philosophical conversation. Are people willing to blow up their relationship over a vibrator? Maybe in the early months, sure. But I don't think when someone's years in, that's the norm.
Yeah. That's really challenging. Because, I talk about it a lot. I think using sex toys or having healthy masturbation practices is totally normal and acceptable. And I do see people have issues with their partners, maybe participating, whether it's female or male. I don't want to gender specific because everyone does it. And I think it's a huge issue. And sometimes it's definitely coming from a place of insecurity, of feeling like I'm not enough for that person. But sort of realizing that there could be some narcissistic traits potentially in your partner, that's challenging.
It could, and again, I wouldn't say that, for example, if you have a partner who's nice all the time, compassionate, empathic, respectful, loving, it's a healthy relationship out of the bedroom, and it's only in the bedroom where this sort of, I don't feel comfortable with the sex toys, you're masturbating, and I don't know that I'm comfortable with that. That's a different conversation.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And I find that to be an unusual conversation, that someone to be that agreeable in real life and not in this other space. So if the person feels like you're masturbating more than we're having sex,
well, then that person may actually have a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then that could be an issue too.
Yeah. Well, I think there's definitely a lot of insecurities in the bedroom because we're not taught how to talk about sex at all, right? And another thing that kids should learn about, right? But I think in general we're not taught, and so people have so many insecurities about themselves, their bodies, and they may, this may be the only space where that insecurity shows through. So definitely don't label them as a narcissist, but definitely something to work through, because it's important that you feel secure in your body and be able to be vulnerable in sex, which is what it is, being vulnerable in the moment with your partner.
It is. And being vulnerable with a narcissistic person will ultimately really harm you. And I think that that's the challenge. So what's happening outside of the bedroom? Like I said, empathy, compassion, respect, perspective taking, all the stuff that makes a healthy relationship. That, hey, listen, are there relationships out there that are healthy in those ways and not the best in the bedroom? Yes, they are. I mean, it's like, just because everything's healthy there doesn't mean things are healthy there. I mean, people have histories that are complicated. And so but I think it's a very different conversation when you're being vulnerable with a narcissistic person. Psychologically, the harm can be such that people will say, I don't know that I psychologically feel safe with this person. I don't ever think it's a good idea for someone to have sex with someone they don't feel psychologically safe with.
Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster.
Mm-hmm.